Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. The Montgomery bus boycott, a seminal event in the U.S. civil rights movement, was a political and social protest against the policy of racial segregation on the public transit system of Montgomery, Alabama. The campaign lasted from 1st December 1955, when Rosa Parks, an African-American woman, was arrested for refusing to surrender her seat to a white person, to December 20th, 1956, when a federal ruling, Browder v. Gale, took effect and led to a United States Supreme Court decision that declared that the Alabama Montgomery laws requiring segregated buses to be unconstitutional. Many important figures in the civil rights movement took part in the boycott, including Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr., and Ralph Abernathy. This is the story behind the bus. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks, a 42-year-old African-American woman who worked as a seamstress, boarded this Montgomery City bus to go home from work. On this bus, on that day, Rosa Parks initiated a new era in the American quest for freedom and equality. She sat near the middle of the bus, just behind the 10 seats reserved for the whites. Soon all of the seats in the bus were filled, and when a white man entered the bus, the driver, following the standard practice of segregation, insisted that all 4 blacks sitting just behind the white section give up their seat so that the man could sit there. Mrs. Parks quietly refused to give up her seat. This following excerpt of what happened next is from Douglas Brinkley's 2000 Rosa Parks biography. "Are you going to stand up?" the driver demanded. Rosa Parks looked straight at him and said, "No." Flustered and not quite sure what to do, Blake retorted, "Well, I'm going to have to arrest you." And Parks, still sitting next to that window, replied softly, "You may do that." After Parks refused to move, she was arrested and convicted of violating the laws of segregation known as the Jim Crow laws. Mrs. Parks appealed her conviction and thus formally challenged the legality of segregation. The chain of events triggered by her arrest changed the United States. Following this event, local civil rights activists initiated a boycott of the Montgomery bus system. In cities across the South, segregated bus companies were daily reminders of the inequities of American society. Since African Americans made up about 75% of the riders in Montgomery, the boycott posed a serious economic threat to the company and a social threat to the white rule in the city. A group named the Montgomery Improvement Association, composed of local activists and ministers, organized the boycott. As their leader, they chose a young Baptist minister, Martin Luther King, Jr. Their demands, they made, were simple. The black passengers should be treated with courtesy. Seating should be allocated on first-come, first-served basis, with white passengers sitting from the front to the back and black passengers from the back to the front. And African American drivers should drive routes that primarily served African Americans. On Monday, December 5, 1955, the boycott went into effect. Although Montgomery officials stopped at nothing in attempting to sabotage the boycott, King and Abernathy were arrested. Violence began during the action and continued after its conclusion. 4 churches as well as the homes of King and Abernathy were bombed, but the boycott continued. King and Abernathy's organization, the Montgomery Improvement Association, MIA, had hoped for a 50% support rate among African Americans. To their surprise and delight, 99% of the city's African Americans refused to ride the buses. People walked to work or rode their bikes, and carpools were established to help the elderly. The bus company suffered thousands of dollars in lost revenue. Sparked by Mrs. Parks' action, the boycott lasted 381 days into December 1956, when finally the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the MIA. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the segregation law was unconstitutional and the Montgomery buses were integrated. The black community of Montgomery had held firm in their resolve. The Montgomery bus boycott triggered a firestorm in the South. Across the region, blacks resisted moving to the back of the bus. Similar actions flared up in other cities. The boycott put Martin Luther King Jr. in the national spotlight. He became acknowledged as the leader of the nascent civil rights movement. Together with Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy organized the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and helped lead the nonviolent struggle to overturn Jim Crow laws. This organization was dedicated to fighting Jim Crow segregation. African Americans boldly declared to the rest of the country that their movement would be peaceful, organized, and determined. To modernize, getting a seat on a bus may not seem like a great win, but in 1955, sitting down marked the first step in a revolution.